Whoa, there we go. Now we're on the air. Now my microphone's working. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. My name is John. This is my channel, your Renaissance Man. It is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. I am testing out live streaming today. I got a few topics, a few things on mind. I'm trying something new since this channel has almost zero followers, zero anything. And according to the people watching right now, I am speaking only to myself. So, what a wild thing YouTube is. What an amazing, what an adventure this has been. I have another YouTube channel that it's more successful. It's not a big channel by any means, but it's very focused, and so I can't deviate from it, otherwise it'll disrupt the direction that channel's going. So this channel is more to do with day-to-day type stuff and maybe some politics, maybe some life, just world events, that kind of stuff. I start my day on the treadmill and then at the gym, and then I have a million things go through my head, that things I'd like to talk about, things of interest, things that have happened over the last days. Some I might feel that my observations may be interesting to some people, and so I wanted to start another channel. And I'm probably not going to go any deeper into my background right now because this is a new channel. And if this channel takes off, then we can get back into my background and when there's actually somebody listening. But as of now, it's just me and my camera. Man, oh boy, it's just it's just, I could turn the camera off and I'd have just as many people watching. You know what I mean? So this will be a stamp. It'll be a mark in time where either things started and things took off or things stayed the same. Things went nowhere. Who knows? I have no idea where this is going. Anyways, title of today's was What the World Needs Now. What does that mean to me, at least? As you may have seen, that my cover photo for this broadcast is Michael Keaton. And this was a scene from the movie Gung Ho that was directed by Ron Howard. I think it was late 80s or maybe early 90s. But anyways, that movie was about a Pennsylvania town and a auto plant that had been shuttered, basically boarded up or shut down because it had been taken over, I think, by a Japanese company. Or wait, no, I think there was a Japanese company moving to the town. This auto plant had closed, and I think Michael Keaton was like a union boss or something like that, and they were trying to convince this Japanese company to invest in their town and make their autos at this former auto plant and start it up again with the crew that was operating it before, and it had been shut down due to probably something like related to NAFTA, where our auto plants were going over the borders to get cheaper labor in Mexico or Canada or whatever. I think that's kind of what it was based on. And so they convinced this Japanese company to invest in it and give it a shot. And, and it's, the image of the Japanese company, of course, back in those days, is very prim and proper, respect, and very clean cut and dry, black and white type scenarios. And then we got our loose knit bunch of Americans here that have heart and soul, but maybe rough around the edges and that kind of stuff. And George Wendt was in there. He, plays Norm on Cheers. And, Michael Keaton keeps being the go between the workforce and, the higher ups. And he keeps, pleading to him, making concessions and doing what he can to keep the plant alive, to revitalize this town that has lost its largest employer, basically. So they, and it's, meant to be a feel good movie, and it's, it has some realistic parts to it. But how it relates to what I was going to talk about today was, that's kind of the scenario America's in right now, where we've boarded up a lot of our production. And I heard one figure the other day that since NAFTA was imposed and the North American Free Trade Agreement, that we've closed over 90,000 production facilities, whether it be, auto plants or, just places that make widgets, light bulbs, whatever, who knows, just any type of production. Not necessarily everything was huge, but in general, like 90,000 facilities, and every one of those has, American jobs tied to it. And, and as a country right now, we've lost most of our production. I mean, our steel plants were just about gone, but thankfully Trump struck a deal with the Japanese to invest in US, I think it was US Steel, I believe, to invest as a partner versus buy it out. And they agreed to that. And, we lose track of the big picture because, the media is heavily slanted depending on what media source you're viewing. It's not unbiased news by any means. But the importance of it is us as a nation, we have to be able to provide stuff that our nation needs, because if we're heavily reliant on outside countries, any little hiccup or glitch can prevent us from producing anything, you know? And how does that, what does that mean realistically is, like our military, for example, we have to have steel and aluminum. That's the backbone of everything in our military. We have to have produce the metals, and we have all those resources inside our borders. But, the people running our country for several decades now have been offshoring everything, all in the name of cheaper goods. What brought us here, this is my little example. What brought us to this point was, say we made here in America, we made the old coat hanger, steel coat hanger that had been around forever, you know, and then we start opening our borders to other countries. And what do? You know, they come out with the plastic coat hanger, and they got cheap labor, and they can produce these for, 1 or 2 cents a piece. And our American companies, maybe they're producing these for 10 cents a piece or whatever, 15, 20 cents. And then we impose nothing on them, and we allow that to come in our country. And, granted, we like cheap goods. We like stuff that makes our life more affordable. But in the long term, what we've done is we have added, an unfair advantage to a foreign power, a foreign country over our country. And what does that do in the long run? Well, that company that's making the hanger for 15 cents a piece, well, first of all, they're going to do what they can to try to compete, because as they see sales start to go in the favor of the foreign option, then they have to figure out, why is their sales going down? Well, now we've got this influx of cheap goods. Well, can we compete? And, and they struggle and they try, and, and I agree that we should be competitive to keep the goods in line. So we're not, we're not being controlled by the goods in our own country, and they, monopolize, and then we're forced to pay high prices. Competition is always good to keep things in check. But, when you have this unfair advantage of almost slave labor to bring a product in, and they can bring it here for next to nothing and sell it for next to nothing, so, they bring it in, they're selling them for 50 cents, let's say, and the American company has to sell them for $1. Okay. Well, stuff like, people will start buying the cheap stuff, even if it's worse, because they just want to save money, and they'll just roll the dice. And, well, I'll try it out. It's only 50 cents. If it doesn't work, then maybe I'll buy the other one again for $1. Maybe I won't. Or maybe I'll just keep buying the one for 50 cents because I can't understand why they would charge me $1 for that product. Either way, it puts pressure on the American company to what can you do? So you want fair labor prices, you want to make fair wages for your, according to your cost of living and all that kind of stuff. But when you're competing against a country where they're their life, the way that their living standards are less than ours, their wages are less than ours. They're not really doing anything unfair to their people. They're exploiting their people, and they're, selling it and taking advantage of our country and just funneling in goods. And one of the things I heard the other day is, in the world economy, the United States, we're responsible for purchasing like 30% of the goods in the world. One country. We have buying power. We have a lot of buying power. And so all this stuff in the media lately about us, about Trump trying to strong arm, these other countries and stuff. It's like, well, that's because they've been taking advantage of us for so long, and we're turning into a country of consumers. Take United Kingdom for example, England. Um, they were the powerhouse of the world for several decades, a couple hundred years. They had the biggest navy. They were occupying several countries, India and Australia, and they had a presence, around the world, in Africa, everywhere. They had a presence. And that's what led to the collapse of them. They started, outsourcing, and they started becoming a country of consumers, and they priced themselves out of business, and they allow foreign goods in there. And now there's no reason to produce anything inside your borders. Well, the country let that happen. It's not because they didn't produce a competitive good to keep other manufacturers out of their other countries out of their country. They fell in love with the idea. Well, I mean, you got politicians involved that are, globalists, and they don't really care so much about their own country as much as you may hope they do. Their intentions are not. Oh, their not intentions are most politicians' intentions aren't aligned with your wants. Your needs. They're looking at it from a global economy and like, we'll just get cheap goods in here. But what it does is it runs a lot of companies out of business because they can't compete with it. And so that's what happened here in America post World War II. Is they're rebuilding nations around the world. Germany and Japan, which were in Western Europe and parts of Russia, were devastated by World War II. Gratefully we weren't. Didn't have anything. Well, I shouldn't say didn't have anything on our soil because we had Hawaii that was, directly attacked in Pearl Harbor. But for the most part, nothing happened on our soil. So we weren't rebuilding, but we were producing a lot of stuff. It was a big boom in production for our country. And then post World War II, we experienced massive growth. And I suppose, in part of the way we're catering to these other countries that are rebuilding. Yeah, we'll take your products and we're not going to tariff you. For the long time, we were just the good guys. I mean, that's questionable. Of course, we can argue about the semantics of what a good guy is, but in general, we were, the world peacekeeper, a world superpower, and just, we're the big guy. We're just going to let it happen what happened. And, we let a lot of goods into our country. And Japan was taking off. They were really good with electronics, toys, plastics, stuff like that. Germany was, better with their engineering and their production of, precision stuff, like stuff, high tolerance stuff, machine stuff, precision. And, we took in a lot of products from them, and, it was kind of laughed at first. We were buying tin toys from them. And it's like, Japanese junk is toys. And they grew and they grew and they became, a great power for production and producing goods. Their auto manufacturing and their electronics. They were premier for a long time. They were the place you went for televisions and anything electronics, radios, stereos, video, everything. And the Germans became well known for their automobiles and motorcycles and tools. And, that stuff went unchecked for a long time coming into our borders. And I'm sure initially it was just like, you know what, we got to help these people out. We're helping them out. We want them to rebuild. We want them to have an economy. We want them to be able to pay for their own stuff and get their people working again and that kind of stuff. So now here we are, you know, World War II ended 45-ish or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact date, but anyways, so now we're here, 80 years later, and America's been taking in goods from all over the world, basically with no repercussions on the, nothing to, I shouldn't say repercussions, nothing to even the playing field for our country, for the businesses that operate within it. I mean, the largest corporations in the world, I mean, you look at the largest corporations in the world, the list, the majority of them are United States companies. And why is that? Why does that matter? Because now if we start imposing these tariffs to equalize the playing field, so we can encourage stuff to, production to happen within our borders again. These companies are already operating here. They can bring bring the manufacturing back to where they're based. And that's great for them in the long run also, because you have better checks and balances when it's inside your border, inside your own country, because you can check on it easier. I've worked for companies where we've done stuff overseas and subcontract to them to make other parts because it's cheaper and all that kind of stuff. And then you send it back and forth a couple times because not exactly what he meant, something lost in translation, and that kind of stuff. Send it back and forth, send it back and forth. And then you have to make trips over there to check on it. It's so much easier logistically to have it all in house where you're based. So now for us to impose tariffs, and that's the other thing too. The intention of these tariffs aren't to be long lasting. It's to even the playing field. So we have incentive for the American companies to start selling in other countries. I mean, American cars, automobiles, you don't see them in other countries for the most part, anywhere in the world. And you can argue, well, they're junk. They're not the same. The Japanese make better, blah, blah, blah. No, there's such an unfair advantage for the countries that there's no incentive for America to even try to bring them in, because it's like, okay, say the average car is $10,000 in some whatever. Let's just say, wow, what country? Just pick a country, right? Let's say the average automobile in India is $5,000. Okay. Say we want to bring a car there, try to sell it, and they slap some tariffs on us. Now it's priced out of the average price of a car. So say once it gets inside the India, it's $10,000. But India is almost impossible to trade with, I guess. But say it's $10,000, so it's twice as much. Is that car going to ever sell there? No. So there's no incentive to even try to bring it in there because of the tariffs, the unfair advantage. It's an unfair advantage to their country. But that's what we should have been doing. But our politicians don't. They're globalists. They don't care about that. And that's why the politicians and the mainstream media is all in an uproar, is President Trump is going to disrupt all that. And not so much disrupt it as he's going to reform it. He's going to change it. He's going to turn it upside down, inside out, and do what he can to make it better for us, meaning U.S. citizens. There used to be a time not that long ago where, my generation, you went to college, you got a degree, there was a job. Didn't matter what field of interest you had. You just went to school and you'd find a job within that field. And now we have this huge problem where everybody wants you to still go to school, or at least, that's kind of our culture. But then we have all these kids graduating with degrees they can't use and tremendous student debt. And we're not training our people for jobs that exist. We're telling them to do it, makes them feel good. And then then they're stepping out in the world and they have nowhere to go. And then they take menial jobs that can't even make their payments on their student debt. And we've got ourselves into such a quagmire here, meaning here in the United States, that it is scary times if you look at it for the long run. You got mainstream media and a majority of the politicians kind of waging war against what Trump is trying to do right now. You start to question reality. What is best? Well, one perspective to have on this is, when you look at it in the big picture, is, you got to, stuff we've seen in movies for over the years. You got this sinking corporation, and it's happened in real life too, a sinking business, and this big outside investor that has lots of money, and they're also a competitor with this company, takes it over, and they turn it inside out. They lay off people, they streamline it, they get rid of overlap and stuff like that, and they make it more efficient and they make it profitable like the rest of their company. That is what's going on now inside of America, is what Trump is trying to do. He is trying, because the people that have been in place for decades now have got it to the point that Americans don't have the accessibility to good paying jobs and benefits anymore. We're becoming a country that's mostly it's going to be more service oriented, service businesses. And that stuff only pays so well. And by service industry I mean like the food industry, serving food, buying, selling food, retail, that kind of stuff. That it's work that doesn't require skill, it doesn't require much talent. It requires you to show up on a regular basis and not miss your shift and not be a pain in the ass to your employer. So that and those jobs just don't pay well. The automotive industry used to be huge in this country. And you look at cities like Detroit now, which are just decimated. NAFTA started that off. We started taking our jobs over the borders, and what we should have been doing. I mean, yes, I mean, you can blame they tried to blame the auto unions for a lot of it, saying, this is unskilled labor. We're paying way too much for this type of labor. We got Japanese companies bringing products in for, a lot less money, but their labor is a lot less, and we can't compete with that. That is when America should have stepped in as a country. And they should have recognized that, hey, it's important that we keep Detroit the center of auto manufacturing for our country. And maybe, it was a center of attention for the world for the automotive industry for a long time. And Detroit is a hollowed out shell right now. Yes, there's other stuff in there, but what built Detroit is just about gone. And Detroit has paid the price for it. There's a lot of Detroit that is just garbage. It's gone. It's decimated. It's nothing now. So, what we're trying to accomplish by all this is leveling the playing field, get production back inside our borders so we can be self-sufficient because we experienced that during COVID also. Um, we had a hard time getting certain products, and like our auto manufacturers were storing inventory from because they were trying to stay open. The ones that are still here, they were trying to stay open during COVID and still keep producing product, which they did. But there was shortages on certain products, and they did all sorts of sacrifices to keep their production going, and then let the product out of the out of the plant, but it was unfinished. There was photos of I think it was Ford. Ford was renting land near manufacturing facilities, and they were parking vehicles that were unfinished because they were missing like microchips and stuff like that. Stuff that made the vehicles unusable. Now, you can argue that's well, whatever. It's just the way COVID was. Okay, now imagine being in that situation with our military where we're at war and now we can't produce what we need to defend our nation because we're relying on a country, that may be doing business with us, but not a strong ally. And now they decide not to sell to us. Now, what do we do? Now we're defenseless. Now we have to fight with sticks and rocks while the other country is fighting with missiles and airplanes. What do you do? So we're at a very vulnerable point right now. And that's what Trump is concerned about. And he's looking out for our future in that regard. Because, we're sitting at 36, I think our debt's at like 36 trillion right now. And this little graph right here, this shows in stacks of $100 bills on the left there. $1 million is roughly the height of a chair in $100 bills, 3.5 feet. Okay, $1 billion is slightly taller than the world's tallest building. It's 0.66 miles high of $100 bills equals a billion. Most people can conceptualize $1 million. $1 billion, that's when it's like it's hard to wrap your head around. Like if you try to imagine $1 billion $1 bills, it's more than the mind can fathom. So then you look at the far right, that's $2 trillion in $100 bills stacked. That reaches a height of 1,356 miles. Okay. But that's only, that's not even the whole amount of our debt. We're 36 trillion. We're 18 times that taller. So 1356 times 18. That's how many miles high. That's how many $100 bills it would take to satisfy our debt right now. We are extremely vulnerable as a nation. Our debt load and our interest is all exceeding what we're needing to operate our military with right now. And that's why you're seeing all these extreme measures being taken now, which is used for fear mongering against the other people that are against this, is you have to make drastic measures. So what's going on right now, it's like taking over a business that's running poorly. It has value, it can be productive, it can be useful to us. We want to save the jobs, the people, we don't want to displace them. Kind of like when you're taking over a company, for example, and we want to keep it going because it still has usefulness. America has all the resources it needs to provide everything it needs, but it needs an equalized playing field in order to accomplish that. So we need to produce our own microchips. We need to produce our own steel and aluminum again. We have the mines. I live in a state that has iron ore mines. We used to have one of the largest sources of iron ore in the world, or for the well, we were like the epicenter for iron ore production for the United States. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in World War II that had its foundation here. I'm not talking Pennsylvania. I'm talking Minnesota, where they pulled it out of the ground. Pennsylvania made the steel. We provided the iron ore. So it's we'll become extremely vulnerable as we get deeper in debt and no longer have the ability to produce what we need. This is a turning point for our country in order to save it, because we're running out of options as things start to dry up, and then it becomes even more expensive to rebuild it. And so there again, back to the tariffs. What are the tariffs going to do? It's going to incentivize these largest corporations in the world based here to bring the production back inside our borders. And what does that mean for us? It means more jobs. It means we're going to have better wages, again, better paying jobs. We're going to have, and then that spirals out. So every time you build a factory that supports whatever, 1,000 jobs, couple thousand jobs or whatever, then you need the infrastructure within that surrounding area to take care of the people that live there. Stores, gas stations, fire department, I mean, it all spirals out and benefits everybody. And that, you know, improves our standard of living again. We used to be, you just worked as much as you wanted to work. You always had money. You always had the options to buy what you want. And, and that generation, in my generation, had that benefit for a while. Now we're starting to feel it because we're not at retirement age yet. So I've already accepted, and you go back to the stock market, because that's been another thing that's been drummed up a lot lately. And, they talk about how it's taken such a hit. But, numbers came out this week, last week, whatever it was, that 88% of the stocks are held by 10% of the population, the upper 10%. The remaining 12% of stocks is held by the other upper 40%. So the upper 50% of the income bracket population is holding on to the stocks. So the other 50% is the rest of us, the ones in debt, the ones that don't own our stuff, the ones that are borrowing money. We have mortgages, we have car loans, we have credit card debt. Some of us may have 401ks, but we're not stockholders making money off of stocks. We're investing in 401k in hopes to someday retire. But for the most part, we're the working poor. And when you look at how 88% is held by the upper 10%, the upper 10% is not even the the ultra millionaires. They talk about the ultra rich being the upper 1%. So even the upper 10% isn't the uber wealthy. I mean, it's more money than I'll probably ever see in my lifetime. But you see what I'm getting at here is, so when they're playing the stock market crap over the top, yeah, it's going to bounce and vibrate and go up and down, and people are going to scream about it. But the people screaming about it have the money to weather the storm. We're the ones that have been struggling for decades now. As things dry up, things go away, opportunities are lost, wages are lost, prices increase, and we don't have a way to rectify it. They're crying about their wealth being less wealth. You know what I mean? Not that I feel that they should carry the load and pay for everything. I don't think that's fair either, because You don't want to deter people of success because they're the ones that hold the keys to the businesses that can make us money. And that's why they're not here. That's why they're producing overseas. There's no incentive to bring it here. And if you try to squeeze them harder, they'll never come back. But now you put tariffs on these other nations that are bringing goods in. Now it's like, man, we can bring stuff inside our border now, and we don't have to have it overseas. It makes it logistically easier for us. And now it's financially lucrative. Yeah, we're going to bring it back. You got to cater to these people a little bit. You can't, I'm not saying kiss their butt and hold them, put them in the driver's seat, but you got to respect what they do and understand that without them, we don't have a chance of surviving. The country's going to go backwards. It's going to end up like the UK. The UK is having all sorts of problems right now because that's a huge problem there. They don't have good paying jobs, and their government is more corrupt than ours at the moment. And it's just, they're struggling. They can't, they don't even have free speech anymore. I mean, you get in trouble for posting stuff on Facebook. I mean, literally, police will show up at your door if you post something up there that's not what the current government wants you to say. They don't even have free speech. You know, it's a weird world right now. It's tricky times. This is a restart, and it's not going to be a soft restart. And that's what's scary about it, is we're still, it's exciting to see. It's exciting to watch. It still hasn't alleviated my fears, because I don't have enough money to weather the storm no matter what happens. And so we're still sitting on the edge of our seat waiting to see what happens. I'm encouraged by it because it takes something like what Trump is doing for it to happen. Without somebody like Trump, it'll never happen. I mean, it is necessary to take these drastic measures. It's necessary to shutter these agencies that aren't doing anything, that are just bleeding off of us, because the previous administration, what they wanted to do was anytime there's a glitch or they need more money, they just turn it back on us and increase our taxes with no accountability where the tax money's going. You know, and that's really bad for us, because as we get poorer, we no longer have it just every time they bump our taxes up, it just, our life becomes more difficult, and we don't have the opportunities we had in the past. So we're just spiraling into a position where we're just increasing the size of the poor, you know. Um and we're keeping the nation afloat, and they're running out of money, and then they come back and try to take it from us. It's like, why? You know, I mean, the IRS, that's not even, I mean, income tax isn't even what pays for everything that runs this country. I looked it up, and it's like 50% comes from the IRS of what it takes to run the country. And so what Trump's trying to do is he's trying to get more money from outside sources, and then lower our taxes and make our lives easier, you know, and it's working. Many nations already have come to the bargaining table to try and negotiate these tariffs out. And that's great. Argentina already came up to the plate, and we're 0 for 0. 0 for 0 with them, meaning they're charging us 0, we're charging them 0. Open trade. Granted, we don't get a lot from them. China is pushing back hard. They doubled the tariff in response to our tariff and added the same amount back onto our products that we bring in the US. And it's like, we're so heavily reliant on China. I'm glad it's going that way, because what it'll do is it'll sort itself over time. And the companies that are buying from China, now the countries we have a better agreement with, I mean, there's a lot of Asian countries over there we can still get these lesser expensive products from, maybe that we will never produce in America. But now we can do it with a country that respects us and we respect them, and have a mutual agreement instead of being in bed with China. So if we do it with another, whatever, just say another Asian nation like Vietnam, Korea, something like that, Taiwan, something that's somebody who wants to work with us, then they take up the slack that China is forcing on us. And then we redirect to a country that's friendly to us. Amen. That's what needs to happen. So in the long run, it's going to work out. It's going to be better for all of us. It really will. Uh, what's scary for the politicians is Trump's running it like a business, and most of these people have never had jobs or ran a business. I've ran multiple businesses. I've been an employee and I've run businesses and I've seen it kind of from many sides. And it needs to be run like a business. And the reason I say that is because a business has accountability to be profitable to the shareholders. We as Americans are shareholders in the business, and we don't have the power to hold our politicians accountable anymore. That's why we're in such a bad predicament. Some may refer to as the deep state, which is the people that are always in power because they're not elected, and they've kind of taken over running the country. And that's what the deep state refers to. These are the people that have been in the government so long, they survive because they're in charge, they're running things. Actually, the elected positions that come and go really can't get rid of them and don't see the reason to, or they get brought into it and they see the reason why to run it that way. And it just becomes this grand circle of corruption from people who've been in power too long with no accountability, don't answer anybody. Politicians come and go. Maybe there's people on a crusade to fix that and then they're gone or they're assassinated. Either way, we have a problem in this country with the deep state. So it's going to take a massive restructuring, and that's what's happening now. It's and I've got friends, family in different industries. Like my son is in food production. He works for a very large company. You would recognize the name if you heard it. They produce lots of foods. They are experiencing, it's food. We buy food all the time. They are not, certain lines of their products are not making money. They're breaking even. The one thing that is doing well is their pet food line. And whatever reason, people aren't skimping on their pets, but they're cutting back on the other stuff they produce. And, that's kind of hard to believe, because we need food every day, but yet the company that produces food is not making profits right now. That's a sign of the times that's going on and how bad we are right now and how important it is for us to change things. I got another friend that works at Federal Ammunition. I was going to say the other one was my son, but I shouldn't have said friend, but a friend that works for Federal Ammunition, and they've been taken over by, I think it was a Czechoslovakian company, and they're already starting layoffs because they took over, I think, around the start of the year or something like that. And Federal, they produce ammunition, and what's bad for them right now is Democrats in power. I shouldn't say currently would be Democrats. The people that are trying to disarm the country. The people are trying to enforce harder gun laws and stuff. When they're in power, ammunition sells. Bullets and guns sell really well when there's somebody trying to take it away from us. And when we have people in power that are trying to restore our Second Amendment rights and protect it, people aren't as scared or nervous. So that stuff people don't sell it because a lot of the people that are afraid of that stuff don't have the money to throw around. But when they're in fear, they'll justify it. And when they're not going to spend it that way because it's like, I don't want to be buying that stuff if I don't have to. I feel like if I need to, I will. But if I feel I don't need to, I'm not going to buy it because it's expensive. It's not where I can spend my money if I don't have to, So they're starting layoffs. I had a customer about a month ago. He worked for Bobcat, the people that make excavators, skid steers, construction equipment. He's younger than me, but he said since he's been working there, the last couple quarters or something, financial quarters, is the first time they haven't experienced growth. So even during COVID and all that stuff, they were booming. And just recently, they've started to feel a hit in sales. So that's the sign, they still feel there's going to be a crash, whether it's whether it's manipulated intentionally or it happens as cause and effect from just the way that the stock market has been going for so long. I've been through the crashes before and it didn't hurt me directly because I didn't have money in the stock market and I still don't. So yes, stuff is more expensive here and there, but where it impacts you usually is if a business goes under. But anyways, he was saying that Bobcat, their management was upset because they weren't they weren't having an increase in sales like they had been every quarter up until recently. So it's starting to hit, it's starting to slow down. There is this overinflated market it's got to go down at some point. It always booms, always returns. It always gets a second wind and takes off again. But we're going to have a hiccup. We're going to have a burp. I don't know if it's going to be ugly, but we're going to feel it. And it's coming. I think what Trump is doing now is going to make it softer than it would have been had the previous administration be still in place. I think he's putting so much in place so quickly that it's going to start correcting itself as it crashes or as it goes back. You know what I mean? It's going to start. I mean, we've already got over $1 trillion committed to new business coming into our country, new factories, new this, new that, from outside companies, outside of our borders coming in. Like this Japanese company investing in US Steel to bring it back up and keep it going and make it bigger, better, all that stuff. We got Apple is coming coming into our country to produce. It's an American company, but they're heavily based in China, and now they're going to be coming here to make stuff, their product. That's amazing. There's an industry that survives off of cheap labor, meaning electronics. So, I mean, good things are coming. It's happening. It's, a lot of stuff can't happen instantly because when you talk about, producing products, you got to have a place to do it. And if it's not an existing factory and then you just, start it up again, I mean, this is stuff that hasn't existed for decades. So there's going to be, a period of, construction, building these facilities. And that's going to be good for the places where they're building. It's going to create construction jobs. It's going to bring people into that area. And then as they get closer to being ready to operate, it's going to be hiring of people to run the facilities. And it's going to help those communities the most. They'll see the biggest effect quickly. Whereas us, parts of the world that aren't going to have that stuff come directly to our area. Hopefully what we're going to see as these oil prices go down, that we're going to start benefiting from cheaper fuel costs, which in turn should bring other goods down because transportation costs should go down. So, I mean, that's the one that's happening that we'll notice the quickest is oil prices going down, because that happened in direct result to the stock market going down. So, I mean, it's happening. We're not going to feel it in our wallet instantly. I mean, oh my gosh, he hasn't been in office for 100 days yet. So it's happening. It's happening quick. It'll take some time, but in the long run, I think we'll all be better off and we'll start to have money in our pocket again. Yeah, I think that's enough random bullshit for now. Anyways, if you get to see this video, welcome. Hope you're all doing well. If you like this kind of content, please leave a comment, subscribe, all that happy fun stuff. I'm going to try to do a daily vlog and see how this goes. Try to do it after I get home from the gym and my brain's kind of overfilling with thoughts and ideas, and spew them out here a little bit and see if anybody listens, watches, all that stuff. So anyways, hope you guys are doing well. Stay confident. It's going to happen. We're going to get better. So God bless. We'll talk to you soon.